Yes, yes. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to Innervision Podcast World. And I'm your host, Apex Divine, that 90s artist. Here with Mr. Cheeks, and we're just talking about life, family life, experiences, how we grew up, and the life lessons that came along with that.
Oh my.
So, yeah.
So, what would you like to know? We were talking about growing up in the orphanage.
Right. It's he has some really good habits. You know, I could say about him since we've been friends. Makes his bed, you know, interior design is him, you know, very decorative, and, you know, good dresser, you know what I'm saying, wide vocabulary. So we just got to talking about that, you know. And these unexpected jewels just fall out. And so here we are.
So, we were talking about being in Bethesda, right? Which was very clinical. But if you had walked into Bethesda, Bethesda is the oldest charitable institution in the United States.
Bethesda.
Yeah, Bethesda. It's in Savannah, Georgia. Lots of people get married there at the chapel. I've cleaned every inch of that place, swept up every bit of the road, raked all the leaves, served at the dining hall, vacuumed. So anyway, we had a structured life. You would get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. You would do your chores. Everybody would be assigned a chore. And you would dust, vacuum clean your room, even over the baseboards, under your bed. Everything had to be like perfect every single day before you left for school.
Right.
Anyway, but it was kind of like, in a way, sort of generic. I always describe it as like show ready every day. And you could have nothing personal on display until I got to be a teenager. And when I was a teenager, I think I got my first job when I was my actual job where I made money outside of Bethesda because we worked all the time and we got an allowance. Our allowance started there were a couple of rules. You got 25 cents when you were in elementary school a week. You got 50 cents when you were in middle school a week. And you got 75 cents a week allowance when you were in high school. The other rule was if you were in elementary school, you had to have your hair cut completely above your ear. Now, imagine this is like the 70s going into the 80s, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were in middle school, you could wear your hair at a half ear. So you knew exactly the age of the kids, not just by the size of their bodies, but by their haircuts. It's very weird. It's like Egyptian society or something strange like that, or, like there was a code. If you were older, you could wear your hair completely down over your ears, and you could have like full long hair. Of course, by the time I got to be a teenager and got into high school, all the styles had changed. We're in the 80s, there's mullets and mohawks and all this kind of stuff. Which,
right.
I had a mullet, but I usually went for kind of a professional soft mullet, where I'd have my hair trimmed above my ears, but then it would be a slightly longer in the back, and then I would part it in the middle or at the side or whatever. I always had a haircut that was very versatile. And I actually learned how to cut my hair because we went to a hair salon school where they would cut their hair, and I picked up on it. So after I was probably about 14 or so years old, I cut my own hair. Cut my own hair all the time.
I did the same
but
thing.
It was funny. By the time I had the privilege and the excitement of actually growing my hair this long, that style was no longer valid. So you lost out. And 75 cents, even in the 80s, was not that much money. I got very good at saving money and accruing. But anyway, so long story short, we were talking about design and fashion. I was the first kid in my high school to wear a mullet, And I remember looking at a mullet when I was like 13 years old, and it was just coming out. And I was thinking, like, wow, that looks so weird, And then I got to be 14, and I was like, that's radical, started watching MTV and stuff. So I cut my hair, and everybody at school started to copy me. So we were very fashionable. and I knew how to dress, and I knew how to dress Miami Vice style. But I started working on the weekends in it was construction cleanup was the first thing that I started doing. It paid $14 an hour back in 1985. I was 14
That was
years
good
old.
money, bro.
Yeah, and my brothers were 13 and 12. I think I was 14 when we got this job. And they were making that money. And I remember my younger brother Farron was very able to work and do what I did. We were a beast about working, and the guy was very impressed with us. He'd pick us on the weekend. We'd go do all the cleanup for the construction in the house. And then he'd pay us, and then we'd skip lunch, of course. We'd get an allowance for lunch. We might buy a candy bar or something. We'd save that money because it's like $15, $20. So we were kind of like rolling in the dough.
Right.
But, you know, we're still in this institution, right? So I took that money, I turned it around, I started investing in like pillows and decorative items for my room. So by that time, we were in another cottage, and it was much more lax. So I took all of the captain's beds, or the beds, I pushed them against the wall, made them like day beds. I put like a friend of mine who was in shop classes, what was his name? Stephen, I gotta think about it. He made a chest. I still have that chest in my house. It's been with me everywhere I've ever lived since that time.
Wow.
But he built this really big chest that was made out of like 2x4s, and it had rope handles. And that went in the corner. So I had a corner and then two beds. They were all captain, like day bed style. And then I had a grass rug that I got from my older brother Danny. I had there were these fans that made out of woven grass that you got from like Indonesia or China or somewhere. They were really cool. And I would cover up the fluorescent lights with those. And then I'd buy lamps and stuff to go in the room. So every time people would come to look at Bethesda, now before it would just be, oh, we're impressed with the neatness and the orderliness and everything, and it's just very physically attractive, right? They'd get to my room and it'd be like, pimped! And all the boys hung out in my room. It's the same thing. I did the same thing in college because we had bunk beds and center block walls. I would like do stuff and hang out and do all the towels right and everything. Make the place look really, really sharp. So our room combined, and when I went to college, I went to Tennessee Temple, which no longer exists. It's an independent Baptist college in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Everybody wanted to come to my room because it was really cool and chic and homey. Even though there were bunk beds, I'd like style everything, you know. So that's what I did in all my rooms. So I moved from that cottage to another cottage. I was telling William that we had Kermit the Frog green floors, like the carpet was Kermit the Frog green, which I hated. So I covered it up with like one of these like wicker sort of rugs. Right. I had like a freaking like little tiny dining table in there. All the beds were like made to look like day beds. It was like a pimp suite, you know. It was like the coolest thing. And every time people would come to Bethesda to tour, like our teachers, we'd have like teacher days where you'd have teacher's tea, and the teachers were allowed to look at how you lived. Everybody would be obsessed with how I lived my life, you know, because I dressed snappy, I was charismatic. I'd been a wallflower when I was younger, you know.
Definitely that with the
but
jewelry.
By the time I had 14, I learned how to dress and do everything, you know. God forbid, Aquanet. Everything.
He got an Ankh. What is it?
It's a torque.
A torque.
I have a couple of torques.
Yeah, a torque. Yeah, I got a couple of torques.
A Snettleson reproduction torque, and then I have a smaller torque that's lighter. I have a wrist torque. I have a lot of different jewelry that I like. A lot of it's costume, some of it's, you know, semi-precious and expensive. A lot of it's blingy, and I love it. And I always think at the heart of it, I'm like, any Roman Celtic person 2,000 years ago, you know, would have been amazed by the technology we have. And then we get this kind of like jewelry snobbery of like, oh, it's not a real diamond, or maybe it's a manufactured stone. And that's kind of been up in the air, you know, or maybe it's a lab-grown stone. And I'm like, I am about the beauty of a piece, you know. I'm about the beauty of how things look when you put them together, the structure, the combinations. And I also look at everything from a very historical standpoint. A lot of jewelry and items and artifacts that are from the past. When you think of the Bronze Age, the sophistication and technology to create something from copper, bronze, iron, to be a lapidary was just phenomenal. And that is what I appreciate about jewelry today. So I don't go for jewelry as an investment value. Like, oh, this is going to last forever, or this is going to be of resale, or it's going to be a snob factor. You know, it's highly unlikely my items are going to be auctioned at Christie's, you know, but they look like they could be. So that's kind of my take on that aspect of life. Yeah, I picked everything out. So yeah, that was the byproduct of me working very hard. I paid my way through high school. I went to a Christian high school for 2 years. There was a tuition. I paid my way through there. You know, there was an anonymous manufacturer that paid part of it, and then I worked hard to pay the other part of it. And then when I went to college, the same anonymous manufacturer offered to pay half of my tuition. I was like, you know what? I can work, and I can get scholarships, and I will not take this money because I don't know if that person's in the same circumstance now that they were 2 years ago when they were helping me. You know, it might be a hardship for them. I don't know.
Right.
But if I don't need it, I don't need it. If I can work hard enough, if I can use my talents. And that's what forced me to audition to be in music groups. I was a very good closeted singer, like an opera singer. I studied by listening to other people that were like Christian contemporary singers on the operatic scale, and opera songs and high church songs, hymns, all of those things. I learned how to sing really, really well, and I auditioned for a music group that paid half of my tuition twice and won it. And the first time I did it, nobody even knew I could sing at all. So I walk into this thing and everybody like, oh, yeah. And then
That's a good example
yeah,
for the young indie artists and the young people out there. We're both good examples of when you put your mind to something, you can build it to fruition, and it becomes reality.
Also, desperation is a motivator. You know, when you got to pay for something, you got to make your way through school. You use your talents that you don't have. One of my biggest talents is being a waiter. That has been my livelihood for years. It's a very good livelihood. It wasn't an ambition. You know, when I was in college, I studied to be a pastor. That was my ambition, and then I realized that wasn't where I was going to go. I ended up in management at a point. I realized that wasn't where I go. I became a server. I realized it gave me the lifestyle I wanted and the flexibility to take care of my parents when they were old. After I got out, I was in an orphanage, but they weren't dead. You know, there were just 12 of us. They couldn't afford to take care of all of us. I took care of my parents, you know, gave them support, helped them. You know, they weren't totally dependent on me, but it was a very big time of needing someone
And
younger.
he did that with a waiter job. So a lot of us young brothers and sisters, we get, you know, we go through things, and then we've been here and been there and been up, and then you don't want to get into the workforce. You don't want to get your hands dirty, and you nitpicky about the job. You say, after
When I was in
COVID
Bethesda,
and all
after
this,
I did
you gotta get a job.
after I did the construction cleanup job, which paid very well, I was doing landscaping jobs. That's why I gardened so much. I learned to landscape. You know, we raked at Bethesda, we cleaned everything up, but then I learned to plant for people who I worked at their houses for $10 an hour, you know, which is really great money in 1987. And I always thought I was going to make more money than I made when I was a teenager. But I was really at this top tier, coming even from that situation where I was like destitute and had nothing, to making this like amazing amount of money for that time and be able to do things with it, pay for education, work my way through. And your plan has to be to get through the next thing till you get to the next thing. It's, I call it like swinging from a ladder or a monkey bar. You know, you're swinging to the next thing to get you to the next thing. And I don't feel like any experience I ever had was squandered. My landscaping work, you know, helped me in college. That was another job that I had. I also waited tables in college. I waited tables. I landscaped. I worked as a singer. So I remember being on campus one day. There's this high-profile group that everybody aspires to be in. You're in church in front of everybody, in front of thousands of students, and traveling on the road in front of thousands of people all the time. And it's a very glamorous-looking job where you dress up in suits, and you know it's a quartet thing, and you're exciting and interesting and a celebrity in a small pond sort of thing. I remember coming back one day from doing my landscaping job and crossing the campus, and I'm all dirty, like I am right now because I'm working all day at my sister's house, but all dirty, unglamorous, and somebody stopped me halfway to my dorm, and they were like, "Warren, what have you been doing?" I said, "Well, I've been working. I do a landscaping job. I cut grass, I trim, people's bushes and things like that. I rake, I clean up." He looked at me and he said, "I never thought of you as someone that would get their hands dirty. It's like the other thing we see you doing is so glamorous. I can't, it's almost like he was like, I can't fathom you not being this glamorous icon movie star sort of status in our circle.
Right.
And doing this." And I was like, "Bill's got to eat." That's what I told him. I said, "Bill's got to eat."
Yeah.
Walked past him, went home, took a shower, went to dinner, I think, and probably went to church because we went to church all the time. And then did my studies. And I graduated with a 3.33 average, working several jobs and doing several things to pay for my college. I graduated with no debt. And I didn't go into that as a thing, but it helped me immensely in my life to understand the spirituality things. I've evolved beyond that, which is great. It's what you should do. You should always grow spiritually and intellectually. And your intellectualism and your spirituality will always be in conflict. There's no doubt about it. Unless you're just in a corner, just taking everything someone's feeding you. If you are an intellectual and you are aspiring to be, a greater human being or greater spiritual being, you will expand out, and it will challenge a lot of things that you believe in. It should be that way, So, but yes, work hard. That's what it is. My waiter job has paid for everything. It's allowed me the flexibility, like I said, to take care of my parents. It's allowed me the flexibility to do YouTube. I'm on YouTube. It's allowed me so much.
Gotten paid from YouTube.
Yeah. And I didn't get to do, it's weird. It's like I was a singer for like 3.5, 4 years, and it paid for my college. And I've never been a professional since. Although when I do karaoke, I'm obviously a professional.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And see, one other thing, the jobs, I was telling my exes, it's like where I'm at right now, when I'm doing this in between days, it's a stepping stone, I had to go through some heights myself, come tumbling down too, I was in a group called Too Close, signed to Taboo A&M Records, executive produced by Clarence Avant, the Godfather. It goes back with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, The Time, Janet Jackson album, Rhythm Nation. He's huge, and he's done films. He's had his hand in some of everything. He's athletes. But I was discovered by him in Piedmont Park, me, Che, and Marcus Jones. And they had a budget, but the guys couldn't sing, and they needed a group. So we rehearsed all the time. Got that job right there. That next Monday, we met on like Saturday. That Monday, we was in Los Angeles. Walking through the car lot. I'm looking at Clarence Avant's Rolls Royce. Walk in there, the first person I meet is Tamika Wright, Eazy-E's wife. She's pregnant with Lil Easy at the time. I'm like, whoa, soaking everything in as I walk through, like it's really happening.
Yeah.
But that was a time in my life, where Too Close was the focus, and for years that was the focus. But then it fizzled out, went on to something else. Started a film company with my cousin, 5 Star Bibbs Films. We had 3 movies. One made it to BET Stars, Black and Blue. We shot that in Bankhead. But I've been around, man. I've been in and out of positions and transitioning and changing hats. And that's life. Change.
Yes. That's life, and I'm going to tell you the secret to happiness, because people consider me one of the happiest people they've ever met, and I have been through hell.
Yeah. Yes, that's one thing I like about his spirit. He's so happy. He's got a good spirit, man. I love being around him for that.
I started out life losing everything. I ended up at 7 years old in an orphanage, and I was working my way from that bottom to where I am now.
Wow.
To me, there was never an apex of I've arrived and this is it. It was always work, you know, and it always will be work. And what I do day to day is work. But the secret to happiness is that you are designed to be a survivor, and you can be okay with what you are doing right now to get to the next step.
That's your inner vision,
Yes,
your natural
yes,
gifts that
yes.
God gave you, your natural
Yeah.
abilities and gifts. It's okay to be your authentic self.
I've lived lifetimes and lifetimes. I'm like a YouTube, I call it a celebrity. Nobody knows this. They don't recognize me on the street. But I have one video that's got 1 million views. That's impressive to most of my coworkers. A lot of them who are coming to Atlanta to try to be artists, to try to be actors, or who are actors but haven't really hit, you know, that A-list level, you know, and they're astonished that this kind of like charming, funny, very even-keeled person has been through all this and done all these things, right?
Yeah.
I even ran for mayor of my city. So, because I was interested in it, it didn't become what I became. My best friend became city councilwoman, and she is still on city council, and she influences the city. I'm aware of the politics of everything. And I keep a foot in the water to know what's going on, and I'm interested, but it wasn't like where I was going to go. It was just something I did along the way. But for instance, is I, in my 20s, was working at the Chattanooga Choo Choo as a waiter, and I met the lead singer of, what was the name of the group? It was, he sang American Woman. You know, American Woman.
American Mama,
Yeah.
get away from me.
Yeah. What's the name of that
Lenny
group?
Kravitz.
No, it's not Lenny Kravitz. Lenny Kravitz covered it. It's
Okay.
yeah.
Oh yeah, he gets me with that all the time.
But he sang American
He go
Woman.
back to the original
This is the
writer
original
of
band,
each
right?
song.
This is the original guy, and it sounds like another group, and I can't think of it right now. But anyway, that guy. I was talking to him. He was giving me a lot of advice about trying to be in the music business because I was sending out demos on little track tapes. You know, they ended up in country circles. But he was like, me and my wife